last night. To go shooting down things.
We got flooded.
Okay.
It's true. The first small part will be full, and then like big ones are like almost up to or up to the other.
Hi, good morning. So pretty. Extra Kadusha. Wait, maybe one more.
Okay, that's all I know anything about Tova. We are we'll start again with the beginning of Yud Beis. This part is a little bit more, a little bit deeper. We have to be a little bit more concentrated here. V'hine, kasher yadua, it's known, Aveda, when we talk about Aveda, which mainly means Aveda in Tefillah, in davening, not just to daven, not just to say the words, but that the davening is a process of spiritual refinement and cleansing and elevating ourselves through davening. So it's known that Yesh Beis Efani Aveda. So the whole point is that during davening, a person develops deeper feeling, a deeper emotional bond with Hashem, deeper feeling, but these feelings, generally speaking, could be in two directions. One is Aveda B'Simcha. The person davens and the davening generates feelings of simcha, and the other is the Aveda, where it generates feelings of either awe or feelings of a broken heart, feelings of how incomplete I am and how much I need to do to be more connected. So naturally, what makes the difference? Of course, it has to do with the nature of the person, but primarily it's about what am I thinking? Being that it's the mayach, it's the brain, the intellect, the logic that generates the emotion. So depending on what I'm thinking, that will make the difference, what I'll be feeling. If I meditate on one aspect of Hashem, that'll generate feeling of simcha. If I focus on a different aspect of Hashem, that'll generate feelings of awe or feelings of bittul or feelings of a broken heart, and so on. So first he starts off with simcha. Aveda b'simcha. And this comes, for example, this is an example because there's many things that a person could think about and focus on, but this is an example. Think about the greatness of Hashem and how awesome Hashem is as we see it in the creation of Yesh Me'ayin. As it's explained in another place, more detail. What is so awesome about Yesh Me'ayin? Two things. Aside from the fact that creating something out of nothing in itself is something nifla, something sort of out of the ordinary, and something really wondrous. We humans have no concept, we have no way of even picturing something like Yesh Ma'ayin. And the reason for that is because in our experience, we know nothing that's Yesh Me'ayin. Everything that comes into existence is Yesh Me'yesh. There's something, which means there's some pre-existing material, and that pre-existing material is developed into something much greater, much better. Starting from a simple example of building a house. So the wood was there, the bricks were there, the materials for the cement was there. The person who builds, his talent is to take all this together, put it together in a proper way, and build a beautiful home. But he didn't create anything Yesh Me'ayin, even though this building standing is a new creation. It's something which wasn't there before. But it's called Yesh Me'yesh. And the same with any kind of creation. In fact, even when we see plants growing out of the ground or a tree growing out of the ground, and we think of where is it coming from? There was a seed planted, and from the seed, there's a tree. And the tree is be'ein arech. You can't compare a tree to the little seed, and you surely can't compare the precious fruits or whatever is growing on that tree to the initial seed. But it's still not Yesh Me'ayin. The earth was here before, the seed was here before, the property in the earth to make things grow was here before, everything was there before. All I did was I put things together. Ayin, page 91. Ayin Mashakosim is a Bediru Matzchel Samach to Samach Rejnon Zayin B'Tchilose. And that mimer, the beginning of the mimer, it's a very famous mimer. The mimer was actually said by the Frierdiker Rebbe's Sheva Brachas. When the Frierdiker Rebbe got married, the Rebbe Rashab said a mimer every day of the Sheva Brachas. So it was 7 long mimerim. But then it was all put together as one long mimer. Came out as a sefer in itself called Samach to Samach. There's another thing, for that place, another thing which is amazing about it. So in general, when a person thinks of something that is beyond our comprehension, it's beyond anything we know, beyond anything we know that anybody can do, to a person, every person, that's awesome. That's something which is beyond my capacity. It makes the person get excited and feel awe towards this, which is so much greater than me. I mean, Allah has kama, when you look at an ocean, you look at a valley, you look at a mountain, anything which is something we're familiar with, but in a small scale. But to see an ocean, the way we see it, and to see certain mountains that are very high, or a valley that's very deep, or a waterfall like in Niagara Falls, for example, which hopefully you'll be seeing soon. I'm sure you've seen waterfalls, but they're little waterfalls. This is the same thing, but huge. Here, you're not seeing something which is similar but bigger. You're seeing something, or you're thinking of something which is totally beyond our comprehension. It's out of our it's not in our capacity even to picture something like that. So that makes a person feel and recognize the greatness and awesomeness of Hashem. But then there's another thing that makes it totally beyond our comprehension. You do, and it's known, the Bria Yesh Me'ayin B'chinas Richuk Erech. This is the part that we'll have to we'll have to concentrate a little bit more to understand. And he's making a difference between two things, Yesh Me'ayin and Ila V'Olu. If you look at the next paragraph, you see this is the difference between Ila V'Olu and Yesh Me'ayin. So this is a new term. Ila V'Olu is not mamish synonymous, but it's similar to Yesh Me'yesh. In other words, there's two ways that things could evolve, one from the other. One is Yesh Me'ayin, which is the way Hashem created the world. And the other, with everything else, it's called Ila va'ol. The word Ila in Hebrew means a cause, and Olul means the effect, the consequence, the result of that cause. In the case of Ila va'olul, where the Ila creates the Olul is a product of the Ila. This comes about through closeness, that the Ila is mislabish b'ha'olul. The Ila has to invest itself in the Olul. Va'olul margish as ilase. And the Olul has to feel the Ila, its source. What's Ila va'olul? What would be an example of Ila va'olul? There are many examples. I think they're bringing one example here. Well, let's talk about two examples just to get an idea. Again, it applies to everything and anything. If A brings about B, creates B, that's called Ila va'olul. This is the cause, this is the effect. So one example which Chassidus talks about would be a Rav and a Talmud. You have a Rav that he understands something in his mind on a very deep level, and he shares that, communicates that to the Talmud, and now the Talmud has that wisdom. Yeah. So a second, the Rav is the Ila, and the Talmud is the Olul. Yeah.
So, is it that it says A creates or brings about B as a result of something happening, or it just? I'm not sure I understand the mashal.
The one that they write?
The one with the Rav and Talmud.
Oh, the Rav and Talmud?
Iyar is the point.
Well, it means that here's a student that prior to his class, he didn't have this knowledge, this information. And in fact, with the real Rav and Talmud, it's like beyond his capacity, would never know this. And then the Rav teaches something new, and now the Talmud has new information. So not the existence of the Talmud, but the knowledge in the Talmud's mind is the Olul, and the Rav who gives him the knowledge is the Ila. So the way this happens is that, I'll get to you in a second, in order for this to happen, the Rav has to apply himself to the student. There has to be a certain closeness between the Rav and the Talmud, which means if the Rav would just teach and not take in consideration who his student is, it's very likely the student will even understand one word that he's saying. So the Rav, before he starts teaching, he has to say to himself and make an assessment, who are the students, what is their level, what do they understand, what are they capable to understand, and based on that, in other words, he has to invest himself into their mind, into their ability to understand things, and based on that, he adjusts his information in a way that they could be communicated to the Talmud. So there's a closeness here between the Rav and the Talmud. Yes.
In the beginning of the ice, we were talking about like what, depending on what you focus on, that will be like your right position. You have to like over nerves or something. So if somebody focuses on how Hashem like created the Rabbi Majeski, then that will lead into like serve Hashem with your simcha.
Yeah. In other words, when you focus on Yesh Me'ayin and you're focusing on this aspect of that, this is unbelievable. And I guess the fact that I have the schus to have a connection to Hashem, which is so amazing, that makes me excited and feel simcha.
But how can we like get excited about something that we don't even understand? Like if we can't comprehend Yesh Me'ayin, then how could it like generate feelings of like?
No, we can't comprehend Yesh Me'ayin, but we can comprehend how Yesh Me'ayin is incomprehensible. And that gets us excited. You know, there's a very famous quote. I'm not sure who the source of the quote is, but it's brought down in Chassidus. Tachlis Hayediyah, which means the ultimate point and ultimate level of knowledge, is when I reach the point that I understand that I don't understand you, Hashem, then I reach the ultimate point of knowledge. So people joke and say, okay, I'm right there. I don't understand the thing. I've already reached the ultimate point of knowledge. But the only mistake they're making, it doesn't say if you don't know anything, you reach the ultimate. It says if you understand that you don't understand. And that is a long journey to understand what it means not to understand. So I guess when we talk about the fact that Yesh Ma'ayin is amazing and we can't understand it, we go into, like he'll go into it here, why we can't understand it, for what reason we can't understand it, and that makes it more logic. There's more logic to it to understand how amazing Hashem is from everything else that we know and we do recognize. So in order for Ilah Ba'ol to be able to function, there has to be a connection between the Ilah and the Ol, which means the Ilah, in this case the Rav, has to apply himself to the student, and the student has to apply himself to the teacher. If the student is going to sit there and not pay attention, naturally they won't be able to grasp what the teacher is saying. And he has to apply himself to hear what's coming from that teacher. So he's aware there's a teacher and he's aware that the teacher is speaking. And not only that, he has to totally apply himself. So the Olol feels and knows exactly where all this information is coming from. And the same is another example, which is we'll be using, is Seichel and Midas. Intellect creates emotion. That's one of the basics of Tanya, basics of Chassidus. When intellect creates emotion, it's also a process of Ilah V'Ol. I think about a certain thought process. I think about how amazing something is, how beautiful something is, how beneficial it is. And as a result of that, I feel and I'm drawn to it. I want it because it's so good, it's so beneficial, it's something so pleasurable. So the love for it comes as a result of what I understand. But the only way that would happen is, again, that there's a closeness between the Seichel and the Midas. That's why we see that there's certain things we think about, especially when it comes to Chassidus, we think about Hashem, certain subjects, and I think, but I don't feel anything. So we know the answer for that is, why is it? If I'm learning Chassidus and I think about Hashem, how could it be that I shouldn't be? If you read Tanya, it looks like so simple. You think about this and this, and your heart will burst with love and yearning and desire and pleasure. Alter Rebbe uses maybe 10 words to describe the emotion, and you say to yourself, I don't know what he's talking about. I don't feel anything. So it says in Chassidus, the reason we're missing das. What is das? That is no connection between the head and the heart. There's a disconnect. If the head and the heart would be, so with Gashmis, we're naturally connected. That's why when I hear about something begashmis that's good, something begashmis that's pleasurable, I don't need to meditate and meditate that being that this piece of cake is dripping chocolate and it's made with these credits. So therefore, my stomach is going to taste good. And then all of a sudden, I feel like I want it. You see it in the window of the store, and your mouth is watering. You walk in and you buy it, even though you just made achlata not to eat any cake. Yeah. So what happens is, how come over there it works without his bonus, without meditation? Is because you're naturally connected. So if you think, you feel. But ruchnius is a problem. So the way that seichel could have impressed midas, affect midas, is when there's a connect. So therefore also the seichel has to adjust itself in a way that it will lead to midas. Sometimes you think about a certain subject, but you think about it in a way that it's so abstract and so removed and so not practical that it won't lead to a certain midas. So you have to really apply the seichel to the midas. So here again, we see the ilah is the seichel, the olol are the emotional reaction, and it's because there's a closeness between the ilah and the olol. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. And that's why the olol is be'erach ha'ila, which means whatever is being created, there's a certain closeness to that which is creating it, because that's how it came about. So we can't say that the two things are infinitely distant from each other. It would never happen if it would be infinite. It only happens because there's a closeness. Hashem came this habas yesh mi'ayin, but by contrast, when we talk about yesh mi'ayin, this habas u'be'ein hareich, yesh mi'ayin brings about something which is incomparable, distant from the source. In other words, imkenu hashpa b'b'chinas richuk erech, this is something and an influence where one thing brings about another thing, but the new thing that's been created is distant from the creator. The creating force is actually hidden from the creation. And it doesn't invest itself and clothe itself and apply itself like the il of ol, because if it would never happen. So before we go on, let me just back up for 1 second. When we say yesh me'ayin, there's a question that's asked in my Marim. It's an obvious question. Who is this ayin that's creating yesh me'ayin? Hashem. We're calling him ayin. Ayin means nothing. How could we refer to Hashem as nothing? He's the real something. We're calling him ayin. So the reason why we call Hashem Yesh Mi'ayin, it means that here's an apple. This is Yesh. Where does it come from? It comes from a place that in that place, the apple doesn't exist. And not only the apple doesn't exist, there's not even material. In other words, when you talk about Gashmias, let's say the example we gave before of something grows, comes out of the ground. You have a seed. So even though the tree and the apples that grow on the tree are something new, but there was something there that was included in the seed. Scientists recognize that in the seed there's certain properties and certain details that leads to the creation of a tree. And even in a human being, when a baby is born, in the initial seed where the baby comes from, all the details of a human being, of all the 613 organs, are already there in a certain way. And actually, it's microscopic, it's a whole different form, a whole different shape, but still there are details there that these details are the source of the details that'll come later. So that means that the human being that's born or the apple tree that grows, in some level was already pre-existed in the source. Yeah?
So the ayin in this case is only ayin in relation to the yesh?
Right, it's ayin from our perspective, that what we know as an existing entity, which is a table, a chair, metal, fire, earth, air, water, it comes from a place where in that place it was non-existent. Not only this didn't exist, but even it didn't even exist in any form or shape. Over there it's ayin, it's a whole different kind of existence that doesn't contain even the potential of this existence that we know.
So, like raw materials or something like you said, like air, fire, water, earth, that is like the ultimate yesh ma'ayin.
Right.
It's just like out of thin air.
Right. In other words, it's not that in Hashem there's already 4 elements, and he took these 4 elements out of himself and created the 4 elements the way we know it. That would mean that Hashem is finite. He's already made up of 4 elements. For example, if Hashem wanted to, could have he created the world with different elements, none of these 4 elements? Yeah. We, for example, have no choice. Whatever we create has to be based on something which we already have within ourselves. I couldn't bring out of myself 10 attributes that are not included in me. I have 10 attributes. Chokhmah, Bina, Das. Everything I do is either coming from Chokhmah, from Bina, from Das, or one of the 10. I couldn't create something that has nothing to do with these 10. But Hashem could have created the world with different 10 attributes, totally not the ones we know. It would be a different world. In fact, there's a place where it says Hashem could have created the world with 1,000 attributes, or with 11, or none of those that we know today. So it's not that Hashem is already sort of, it consists of these elements, and therefore that's when he creates the world. In him, there are no elements. Not only there's no elements, not even anything in him that's leaning towards these elements. For example, we gave an example once of a fire. If you have a hot coal, it's a hot coal, there's no flame, and you blow on the hot coal. Is this fire yesh me'ayin or yesh me'yesh? You blow on the hot coal, now you see a flame. Did the flame exist before? There was no flame before. So why isn't it yesh me'ayin?
It exists in potential.
What was there before?
Potential.
Right? The hot coal was hot. If a person would touch it, it would get burnt. If you pour water on it, it would become extinguished. It would be extinguished. That means there's something in the hot coal, which is of the element of fire. It's just not an actual flame. And by me blowing on it, the flame comes out. So the flame is not new. It already existed to some degree in the hot coal. That clear? Then we take another example, a flintstone. You have a rock and you strike it with a piece of metal and a spark comes out. Is that the same like a hot coal? No. Because the flintstone, there's no fire in it. It's not hot. You won't burn yourself if you touch it. And water won't extinguish it. For some reason or other, this is the phrase that's brought down in many Maimorim, that if this flintstone, in Hebrew it's called Tzur HaChalomish. That means the flintstone. If this would be soaking in water for 1,000 years, 1,000 years, not less, then you take it out and you strike it, would a spark come out? Yes. That means that water doesn't extinguish it. Is there any fire in the flintstone? No. Is there fire like it is in the hot coal? No. Could we say there's something in there which is a source for fire? Yes. Because when you strike a flintstone, you won't find rubber coming out, or glass, or potatoes, usually. That means there's something in the flintstone that's already connected to the element of fire, and when I strike it, that's when it comes out. What that something is, it's just a deeper potential. So we can't say it's absolutely ayin. There is something there. When we talk about Hashem, we're saying there's nothing there. It's only He chose. When do the 10 spheres begin to exist? When does the physical world begin to exist? The moment Hashem chose to create it. But within Hashem Himself, it's totally non-existent. And that's what the word ayin means. It's coming from a place where this does not exist in any level. Do we need to chew this over? Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
saying that
That's
Yeshna, the potential exists within the first thing. Then, like if you have A and then there's B, within A there's potential for B. Not Yeshna.
Yesh me yesh.
Yeshma yesh. But for Hashem don't, like so to speak, the ideas for the creation of these things exist, or is that from a place like higher than the spheres?
Exactly. When the ideas exist, let's say like a human being, I think before I do something, that itself is already part of the process of creation.
So there's a point.
There's a point in Hashem that's beyond creating, beyond thinking of creation, beyond making any decisions about creation. It just is. Hashem just is. He's not bound to creation. That's a choice that He makes. So He Himself is absolute ayin. So now the word yesh me'ayin means that the yesh doesn't exist in the ayin. Let's take the other example, ilav alu. Do the emotional attributes exist in the logic? So the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, yes. In other words, for example, a person thinks about something that this is very precious, this is very valuable, and as a result of that, I want it. So this emotion that I love it or want it because it's so precious and so valuable and so good and so pleasurable, it exists in the logic, which means first it has to make sense to me. That something that's so pleasurable and so less and so good and so valuable, I should want. The brain has to dictate to me that this is something I should want. And as a result of that, I actually want it. But first it has to make sense to me that something of this nature, of this value, I should want. Why are children, for example, not afraid of certain things? And you can't understand, how don't they get it? Because they don't understand that just because this is this, I should be running away from it. They don't get it. So therefore, if a person understands that this is dangerous and I should run away from it, that itself, it's the feeling of fear. Let's say something's happening and you suddenly feel fear. Your heart is pounding with fear. There was a process there. Your brain understands that this and this is going on. And your brain understands that this is something you should be afraid of. And once the brain understands that, from the brain, it goes to the heart. This is what the Alter Rebbe refers to. You might remember, it's in Tanya, chapter 16 and 17. The Alter Rebbe talks about the emotions that exist in the heart. And this is just like when a baby is born. So in the moment the baby is born and you have a human being here with hands and feet and all the organs, Baruch Hashem, before that, the baby is included in the source. It's part of the mother. Before the tree grows out, it's included in the seed. Before the emotions are created in the heart, they're included somewhat in the brain. In fact, there's a possibility for a person to have the emotions in the head. I understand. And I understand that I should get excited, but that my heart is not getting excited. There's a disconnect. So if we think of the other example of a Rav and a Talmud, the Rav understands something on a very deep level. And now when he wants to communicate this to the student, he simplifies it, he waters it down, he makes a mushal, now he gives it to the student. So true, the student sees it from his perspective, but the perspective that the student has had to be in the Rav's head before he gave it to him. Otherwise, how could he give it to him? So what comes out later existed before in the source. Yesh Mi'ayin did not exist in the source. I'm trying to be not too philosophical, trying to make it as simple as we can. To make it simpler, if you can take this book and open it up to page something. Yeah. Page 75. Yeah.
Does not exist before. Before technically version does not exist. How yeah, I'm like trying to put in words. If there is no time for Hashem, right? So how does I not exist? How does I exist where there is no before for Hashem? Before it's like a time word.
Why are you asking specifically about time?
I don't know.
In other words, you're saying if nothing existed before, then how could you say the ayin is there before the yesh? The word before already means time.
Yeah.
So really, it's a general question. How could we say that before the creation, there was this world, and then there was the next world, and then there was the next world? How long did it take for all the worlds to evolve one from the other? Did it take days, weeks, months, years? There's no time, shouldn't take any time altogether. Then what does it mean this came first and that came later? Yeah.
So for Hashem, it's kind of all existing at once.
If there's no time, then how could you say otherwise? It's known. I don't want to. We're going off on a tangent. We're getting off on the exits for a minute. Getting off, and that is that time is another measurement of space. That's what time really is.
Wow.
If there's no space, then there's no time. But we'll put that on hold because we're confused enough, and then we'll go back to this. So let's look at page 75. I have a little chart there about the difference between Yesh Me'ayin and Iyar V'Ol. So what we discussed is the first two things here, first three things really. Let's look at the Yesh Me'ayin versus the Iyar V'Ol. A, the Yesh does not exist in the source, meaning the Ayin, it doesn't exist in the Ayin, even potentially. That's why it's called Ayin, that the Yesh is not there at any level whatsoever. Iyar V'Ol means the Olul, the outcome, the result, exists potentially in the source. What's the source? The Iyar. That's one point. Another point, when the Yesh is created, it is because of that, because of A, we come to the conclusion of B. When the Yesh is created, it is new in an absolute way. It's totally new because it didn't exist before in any other way. When the Olul is created, it's not totally new, rather something that was already in existence potentially inside the source. So it's not new, it's just a transition from the potential to the actual. It's almost as if you would say it changed locations. Before it was in the source, and now it's independent, has its own existence. But it's not totally new. And then we're going to learn about the next two, C and D. We did part of it, but we didn't the whole thing. So here's another 2 points that make the difference between Yesh Me'ayin and Ilav. The whole purpose of this is to be able to understand more about the greatness of Hashem that it creates Yesh Me'ayin. When you compare one thing to another, by contrast, you can understand the greatness much more. So we're comparing Yesh Me'ayin to Ilav. So let's go back to page 92. And we're going to the third paragraph. Masha'en Kain, in the English by contrast. Masha'en Kain b'shabas Yesh Me'ayin. By contrast, when we talk about the creation of Yesh Me'ayin, sheshabasu be'ein hareich, what's being created here is something that's incomparable. You can't even compare it to anything that existed before. That's why it's called ayin. That means here there's an influence where one thing creates something else that's far from it in a way that it's incomparable distance. There's no common denominator between the two. This is yesh, and that is comparable ayin. And that's because haboira misalem or mistater ma'anivra. In the case of yesh me'ayin, the creating force conceals itself and hides itself from the creation, which means whatever is being created doesn't really feel the source, because if it would, it couldn't exist. This creative force is not mislabish, it doesn't invest itself and enclose itself in that which is being created, like the Iyar and the Ol, where the Rav invests himself in the mind of the Talmud, or the Seichel invests itself in the Ol, invests itself in the emotion. Yesh Mayim, we can't say that, because the ayin is this realm, which is called ayin. There's no room, so to speak, no space for something which is yesh. In that world, in that realm, yesh doesn't exist. So if the ayin would be revealed, the yesh couldn't exist.
So is that, I missed the third thing because the Zoom crashed. That's the third thing or the fourth thing?
You missed what?
I only got the first two in the chart because your Zoom crashed. It just came back on.
I'm sorry.
So what you just said right now is the third point or the fourth point in the chart?
Third point.
Okay.
Yeah, third point, not the fourth.
So that's the closeness that, okay.
The third point is that the creating force not only doesn't apply itself, but actually has to remove itself, has to be distant from that which is being created, because the word ayin by definition means in this realm, in this place, there is no room for something which is a yesh. It's a different kind of existence. So therefore, if it would be revealed, the yesh couldn't exist. So the way Hashem creates yesh mi'ayin is the ayin is totally concealed from the yesh. So one of the differences between our world and all the spiritual worlds, we know that there are 4 worlds, and the truth is there aren't only 4 worlds, there are infinite worlds, it says. Each world has hundreds and thousands, millions and billions, and maybe more levels of descent. But there's one common factor in all the worlds, is that each world, the lower one, feels the higher source where it's coming from. And by us, in our Gashmistic world, we don't feel our source at all. In other words, a human being, we feel as if we just came from whatever. That's why people have a hard time believing in Hashem, in the Creator. We don't feel our source. The source is so hidden from us that we feel as if everything just came about by itself. Why is this? Because we're yesh me'ayin, and the ayin has to completely conceal itself for the yesh to exist. Yeah.
So I guess like it's when a person is bittul, like when they're like completely nullifying themselves, that's when the light is able to come down. That's when you get clarity. That's when you feel Hashem's presence.
Okay. Yeah, it's true, but we'll wait till we get there. We got to go slowly. We got to go slowly, piece by piece, and step by step, and then we'll get to that point. Okay, so this point that we're making now.
So it's a question. Okay, you'll get there.
Yeah. So don't forget your question when we get there. So this point that we're making now is that the ayin must conceal itself, withdraw itself, not be felt by the yesh. Because if it would, the yesh couldn't exist. Why not? Because that's the definition of ayin. Ayin means that these kind of existence, like 4 elements, tables, chairs, wood, all this cannot exist in that realm. So that realm would be exposed, would be open. This couldn't be. And if this is here, then that's hidden. So yesh me'ayin is the ayin hides itself, conceals itself. So this is the third point in that chart, that the process of creation requires that the source, the ayin, distances itself, conceals itself from the yesh. The process of creation by ilavol is the opposite, that it has to reveal itself and apply itself in order for the ol to be created. Like the seichel has to apply itself to the emotion. The Rab has to apply himself to the student. Got it? Okay, we'll stop here. To be continued. So as you go through your day, try to think when you walk outside, when you see things, what's another example of yesh me'ayin, ilavol? Again, we don't have yesh me'ayin, but there are things in the world that are somewhat similar, at least in some ways, to yesh me'ayin. Okay, let's stop here. You're welcome.
Actually.